I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Ollie Rankin, a virtual reality and visual effects pioneer, award-winning director, multidisciplinary artist, futurist, and activist. Ollie has spent more than 2 decades pioneering new technology and techniques in filmmaking. From the use of artificial intelligence to choreograph epic battle scenes in the Lord of the Rings and Matrix trilogies, to his recent induction into the Unreal Virtual Production Fellowship, he's worked to balance creativity with pragmatism in the service of highly engaging storytelling. Ollie joins us today to discuss the metaverse and extended reality technologies, as well as his work with Sansar and Pansensory Interactive companies. So, Ollie, welcome. It is truly an honor to have you with me today, sir.
Pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
So, today we're talking about your work in the metaverse and extended reality, or XR. And I think a lot of people have heard the word metaverse, right? It's been kind of bandied around the web lately, but a lot of them, myself included, aren't completely familiar with what it is. Can you give me kind of a high-level overview of what the metaverse actually is?
For sure. So the term actually comes from science fiction, and I think it was originally coined in the Neil Stephenson book Snow Crash, and it was describing what had already been sort of established by other cyberpunk science fiction authors as this idea that rather than our interactions with computers and the internet being a two-dimensional thing, it should actually be a fully immersive three-dimensional thing. So we also talk about spatial computing as a catch-all term to try and explain the difference between regular computing and regular internet and the metaverse. And really, the metaverse, it's a term that it's already becoming a little bit stale, I think, because of some of the companies that have attached themselves to it. But what it really means is that in the future, it doesn't make sense for all of our interactions to be two-dimensional. There are some things that it just makes more sense for us to have a fully immersive or integrated experience and interaction. So, when I'm when we're driving a car, for instance, we're used to having the heads-up display or the dashboard, and we expect that more and more we will have these kind of on-demand things that don't require us to carry a special device or pull a special device out, but that kind of the real-time information is available to us in our field of view. That's sort of the augmented reality category. Then there's the sort of mixed reality category, which is where you're also seeing the real world, but that the elements that are being added to it are being integrated into the real world in such a way that they feel like they're part of it. So rather than being a heads-up display or an overlay, which is generally what people mean when they say augmented reality, mixed reality means either that what you're seeing is it's lit like it belongs in the world. It looks realistic like it belongs in the real world, and it sort of it becomes a part of your experience of reality. And that term mixed reality is also used to describe the way that people shoot video of somebody who is in VR and live composite that person's video into the virtual environment that they're in. So it's about sort of mixing and integrating reality and virtual elements. And then we also, I think you're also curious about the term XR, because I think a lot of people recognize that there is a commonality between these different technologies, but that they are in these sort of distinct categories, whether it's virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality. And people get tired of saying VR, AR, MR, and so they try and come up with one catch-all. And that's kind of where XR is at the moment, is that a lot of people have fallen to using XR as a catch-all. Again, I like spatial computing as a term. I also like star R, but I haven't been able to get that to catch on. So I think I'm having to sort of stick with XR.
Yeah, actually spatial computing. I really like that one. That does sum it up really well. So you've done tremendous pioneering work in filmmaking. So I guess the thing that I'm wondering about is what led you to believe that, again, the metaverse and XR was the way forward? What was, and I should also ask, what was that point where it just clicked for you and you said, this is it?
So it's actually predates my work in the film industry. Well, I grew up reading those cyberpunk science fiction authors, and watching the movies like Tron and Lawnmower Man. I've been, and I in those days I was using VR as the catch-all term to mean what we'd now refer to as XR or spatial computing or metaverse. I think I was probably a teenager when I realized that the ability to see the world through somebody else's eyes and to have the same experience of the world that somebody else does would enable us to overcome a lot of the misunderstandings. And I think a lot of the problems in society come from misunderstandings. We're all biased by our own experiences and our own knowledge and our own backgrounds and upbringing. And I had this idea all the way back then, long time before the technology was approaching anything like consumer ready. I had the idea that if we could tell stories from other people's point of views, we could break down some of these biases and overcome the misunderstandings and the prejudices. So I've been waiting for VR. Again, I'm using that as a catch-all. I've been waiting for XR for 30 years. And I guess, I, as soon as it came along, as soon as the first Oculus Kickstarter was launched, I had already had a career by that stage in the visual effects industry, which turns out to be, coincidentally have a lot of the same sort of technological and technical and sort of technique elements in common with XR. So I was able to quickly leverage what I already knew how to do and the technologies I was familiar with, the talent that I had met, the other artists and technicians, and jumped into it full steam. Although, as I think anybody in the space recognizes, and a lot of people outside the space, it isn't moving as quickly and the adoption isn't happening as quickly as people anticipated. I've been telling people for years, I think this is the year that XR becomes a thing, but we're still not there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I grew up with 1980s cyberpunk as well. And so I was like, for me, Mondo 2000 was an enormous influence. And then there was like Max Headroom and all of the TV type stuff. So yeah, I absolutely resonate with where you're coming from there. So in terms of storytelling, one of the things that I kind of wondered about was, in traditional media, right, like film, television, things like that, you've got this narrative and you're able to kind of guide people, right? You set up the shots, you set up the action sequences. I mean, with what you've done in traditional filmmaking, it's very precise, right? But
Absolutely.
in the metaverse, in an XR environment, if you're doing any kind of storytelling, people are able to move around and it takes them out of the established narrative. So I'm wondering, from an artistic perspective, does that change how you approach things?
Absolutely. But what I find that a lot of people forget is that storytelling from its very start has been an interactive and adaptive medium. We started telling stories around the fire. And when you're sitting there telling a story around the fire, you're watching the reactions of the people that you're telling the story to. And you can tell if they're engaged, if they're not quite understanding, and so you'll adapt the story in real time as you're telling it according to the audience and their reactions. And so I think that's something that that is so fundamental to the way that we've been telling stories for millennia, that gets lost when you write a book or or when you do television or film. So I think that kind of thinking is something that you need to bring to the table when you're telling a story in XR. And then, there are other storytelling forms that have already got a lot of established techniques for dealing with that. And, one example would be live theater. Also, still has some of that kind of interactivity and responsiveness with a live audience. And then there's another aspect, which is if you think about Disney. Now, a lot of people think of Disney as being this powerhouse of storytelling. What a lot of people don't realize is that in my opinion, some of the greatest IP or the greatest inventiveness and creativity that Disney has ever executed is in the lead up to the rides at Disneyland resorts.
Mm.
So the way that they keep you engaged, they make the time that you spend in the line interesting and sort of allow you to lose track of time while you're waiting for these rides. They sort of, they take you on this journey into the experience, the sort of onboarding. That's also another area where XR creators need to learn from, to make sure that we're taking into account getting somebody from the real world into the story world so that they're primed when the story starts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so, before I get too far into the storytelling aspect of this, I wanted to go back to, again, in the metaverse. Facebook recently changed the name of their parent company to Meta, right? And
Yep.
as I understand things, that was part of their commitment to making the metaverse a reality. And as you'd mentioned, they also own Oculus, which is VR headset that can be used for immersive metaverse apps. So, I'm wondering what your thoughts are with Facebook going into this. And then is this investment in hardware one of the reasons they've decided to commit so heavily to it? Because it looks like these are kind of part and parcel, I guess.
Yeah, I think I mean, I've read a few different analyses, and I obviously don't have any visibility onto the internal strategy at Meta, but I tend to believe that they have looked at companies like Apple and they've seen that a company that owns the entire ecosystem from hardware through to software through services has the ability to keep on growing and adapting. And I think they're recognizing that the social networking platforms that they are obviously most famous for, and that they've made all of their money from up until this point, are things that are more sort of generational. So Facebook is not popular with younger generations, and I think it's inevitable that there will be generational changes such that Instagram ceases to be popular. And, instead of just buying each new generation's preferred social media platform, I think their strategy is to say, hey, what's a vertical, well, what's a platform that we can own, all the way from the hardware to the content and services. So I think it's a purely a business decision. I think that the sort of the public perception of them as a company has been pretty hurt over the last couple of years, and I think that is not being remedied at all by what they're doing in the metaverse. I think a lot of people are worried that if a company that knows me so well that I can manipulate me into being angry about things and react to them and reshare them, imagine how much more intense that could be in a mixed reality or virtual reality space where I can't necessarily tell the difference between what's real and what's not. So I do have concerns about that sort of that those business practices being rolled over into immersive spaces, and what that could mean for the ongoing collapse of civil society that we've seen over the last decade.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, the Oculus system, and if I understand this correctly, is so Oculus basically completely covers the eyes. It puts you into kind of a virtual reality environment. And that would be different than something like Google Glass, which was, I believe, somewhat of a false start. Apple is also rumored to be working on those. I'm not sure, but are the glasses that you're wearing today, are those XR glasses? Or
They're not.
okay,
No, they're
okay,
just regular prescription glasses with
okay.
ridiculous.
No,
But
I love them. They're wonderful.
thank
So
you. But I think, we're going to have to get to a point where XR glasses have such a lightweight form factor that they can be, the same as the spectacles that you're going to wear anyway, before we can expect people to have mass adoption. I think, one of the things that we don't think about is, we always think of these sort of new technologies as being transformational, but really they're additive. If you think about, when the television came along, it didn't kill the radio. When the internet came along, it didn't kill the television. When streaming came along, it didn't kill the movie theater. And when VR came along, when XR comes to fruition, it's not going to replace all of our existing technologies. And right at the moment, we all carry these supercomputers around in our pockets that give us a bunch of sort of superpowers. We're able to outsource remembering things to this little box in our pocket. We're able to outsource navigation, and it gives us these sort of social superpowers that allow us to be in contact with everybody in our lives at various cadences. When you put on a VR headset, you suddenly lose all of that. So that, it's not yet additive to the experience of our current sort of technological capabilities, or the sort of the symbiosis between us and our phones. And this is one of the big reasons that I think that when Apple does release their headset, that it will possibly have a much better chance of mass adoption, because I'm sure that it will integrate with your phone, and it will allow you to still have access to all of those sort of superpowers that your phone gives you without cutting you off from anything. My understanding is that their device is sort of a hybrid XR headset, so that it can give you the ability to see your surroundings and have augmented or mixed reality elements overlaid into them, or that it can completely block off the outside world and give you a fully immersive virtual reality experience. But I imagine that even in those virtual reality experiences, maybe you'll be able to pull out your phone and see a text message that you've received, or maybe there'll be a notifications bank in there that allows you to see and interact with people.
Yeah, so it sounds like probably the hardware has been the major limitation then, because I was thinking about this, and I was like, what's the killer app? And I guess that's another part of this. And I know that's something that you're probably working on with Sansar, right? Because you guys are developing virtual worlds, and so you're way ahead of the curve in terms of that. Maybe it's just kind of waiting for the hardware to catch up with that so that people can implement it more.
I think, yeah, there's a part of it is hardware, and a part of it is sort of the social engineering, and a part of it is the sort of the app and content ecosystems that are available. And I think all of those things need to be moved forward in order for there to be mass adoption. I personally think that the killer app for augmented reality is when I'm walking around and I bump into somebody on the street. I never again want to have that awkward thing of thinking, I know this person, but I don't remember where I know them from. If my glasses gave me a little overlay that said, this is the person's name, this is their dog's name, this is how you know them, this is their, how you, this is what you should ask them. I think that would be an amazing reason to wear a pair of augmented reality glasses everywhere I go. A lot of people think of the iPhone as being the turning point, or the sort of the advent of the smartphone. But really, if you think about it, Apple had experimented with the Apple Newton, I think probably in the 90s,
Yeah.
and they weren't able to convince anybody that they needed a computer in their pocket, partly because there wasn't the internet yet, and so those devices weren't connected to anything and therefore couldn't really do anything. And partly just because there wasn't the sort of the cultural awareness of what would be useful about having a computer in your pocket. And I think when the internet came along and then the BlackBerry came along, I think it was the BlackBerry that paved the way for the smartphone, because the BlackBerry was suddenly a device that enabled companies to make their employees more productive by giving them a device that could check their email and their calendar in real time at all times. So I think a similar sort of thing needs to happen with the social engineering, if you want, of the way that public perceive spatial computing, and the way that they people need to recognize how it can benefit them, how it can allow them to, outsource more of their mundane tasks to the computer, or to AI. I think AI is also going to be a big part of it. We're seeing the like with Chat GPT and other sort of AI collaboration tools, we're seeing that a lot of things that people would spend a lot of time on can be outsourced to a computer, and as we become better at collaborating with computers using natural language, that's also going to empower the mixed and augmented and virtual reality capabilities, because one of the big barriers to that at the moment is user input. We've all gotten so good at typing, and we can type on our phones with our thumbs, we type on our computers with our keyboards, and that allows us to have a very fast rate of input. But when you're in virtual reality, you can't see a keyboard, and if you're using a virtual keyboard in virtual reality, it's a very slow way to interact. But if you can use your voice, and soon, obviously, with some kind of neural implants, you'll be able to use your thoughts to control these things. So yeah, it's a fool's errand to try and guess when the mass adoption of VR will happen. But I do think that you hit the nail on the head by saying that what we're doing at Sansar is one of the things that we think is going to really be a killer app. Obviously, Meta also believes that the social aspect of spatial computing, of XR and the metaverse is a big a big driver of it. But I think there was a study that just came out recently from Harvard about, they've been following these people for 30 something more years, maybe now, and they've sort of analyzed what real things actually scientifically can be correlated with people's quality of life. And the most important thing was relationships and human connection. And so at Sansar, we're very much focused on allowing people to have connections with each other, which would otherwise be impossible, whether because of reasons of physical distance, or social people who have body dysmorphia, or who are not able to present themselves in the physical world in a way that is a true reflection of their internal identity. We allow them to present themselves how they truly identify, and to engage in a very sort of authentic and intimate way with other people.
Yeah. Now, if it's okay to ask, in terms of Sansar, and again, I took a look at the website, and I'll put links in that for people to learn more. Is it okay to ask where you guys are moving forward to with the company and where things are going? Because I was able to look at the virtual worlds that were being created, and it's amazing, and it's very diverse also, right? There are a bunch of different virtual spaces that you've created. How are those being implemented? How can people interact and get involved with those?
And that's a very, very important question. I think when Sansar was originally spun up by Linden Lab, who were the creators of the Second Life platform, which is arguably still the first and most successful metaverse platform out there. When it was originally spun up, it was intended as a VR first platform, and a lot of effort was made to make the VR experience as immersive and as polished as possible. And that was all on the assumption that there was going to be a massive adoption of VR in a short space of time. That still, of course, hasn't materialized. And what we've discovered, and one of the things that blew my mind the most when I first hosted an event in Sansar in 2020, I was partnered up with the team behind the Shangri-La Field at the Glastonbury Music Festival in 2020 when that was first cancelled because of the pandemic. And I had already been doing a lot of work in the virtual music space at the time and had been evaluating a lot of the platforms that were available. And I loved the fidelity of Sansar. I thought it was the best looking, and to this day, it is still, in my opinion, the best looking, the highest fidelity, the
Yeah.
most photoreal virtual platform out there. And I knew that when I go into this event in virtual reality, when I put on a headset and I have my headphones on, and I'm going to feel like I'm really at this music festival. And that's, an incredibly transformative, transportive experience. But what I wasn't prepared for, and what really was the key takeaway for me from that first virtual reality music festival, was that um, even without VR, when I was just piloting an avatar around on the screen of my laptop, and I had customized that avatar to be a reflection of myself, and I had chosen a bunch of what are called emotes, so these motion capture clips that like dance moves and sort of behaviors that you can apply to your character. So when I was piloting my avatar around and dressed it up how I wanted to look and had these dance moves, and my other friends from around the world had customized their avatars, and our avatars were all standing in a circle on the dance floor, raving away like lunatics, and each of us was in our pajamas dancing in front of our computers. It felt like we were all there together on that dance floor. We were able to project ourselves into our avatars, and we were able to project our friends into their avatars. And so we realized that focusing on VR primarily was actually preventing a lot of people from having a very similar transformative experience. And so what we've been focusing on for the last few months at Sansar, and what we're focusing on for the rest of 2023, is making so that anybody on any device can get into our platform. So we at CES earlier this month, we officially launched an LG Smart TV app. So for people with compatible LG Smart TVs, they're now able to use the Magic Remote on their TV to get into Sansar and pilot an avatar around at a live event or at any of the pre-existing worlds. In the next couple of months, we're going to launch a web browser app that will allow people to get into the metaverse through their web browser. We're going to do the same for mobile phones. We're going to come out on Mac OS, Xbox, other consoles, and other devices. Because really, in our opinion, the most important thing is not to give that sort of fully immersive virtual reality experience, but to give the sort of the next level down of that experience, that sort of the experience that we're all used to playing in video games now, right? We have a generation of people who have grown up in first person and third person video games. So we already, it's sort of it's part of our culture to to see ourselves in the avatar on the screen, and giving people the ability to have those sort of social interactions, to attend events. It's good for people, but it's also good for brands and for companies, because people are getting sick of seeing advertising, right? The sort of the 2D ads that dominate our websites and our video streams are turning people off. But if a brand instead sponsors a large event and gives people the ability to come and have an amazing experience for free, that's something that people are going to be much more likely to have a favorable opinion of the brand afterwards than if they'd seen an ad.
Wonderful. Well, Ollie, I can't think of a better note to close on than that. That's absolutely amazing. So let me thank you so much for your time. Again, it has truly been an honor to have you with me. And let me close by asking, I mean, obviously people should visit sansar.com. What would you recommend that they do to get involved with this year?
Absolutely. Great question. Thanks. I definitely recommend, yes, downloading the free PC client. So if you've got a Windows gaming PC, then you'll already be able to download it. And not only will you be able to jump into a world, customize your avatar, explore all of the worlds that are in Sansar already, and of which there are thousands. But you'll also, because it comes for free with the creator tools. So if you have any interest at all in building your own metaverse footprint, you can get into the worlds. You can use existing assets that are available to buy in the Sansar store, or you can create your own in software like Blender or Maya, or 3D Studio Max, and bring those into Sansar. We find that people are spending about half of the time in Sansar in the create mode. So the create community there is incredible and vibrant and supportive. And for you people who don't yet have a PC, particularly a gaming PC, you'll need to wait probably another few weeks to a month before you'll be able to have almost all of that experience through your web browser. And that was going to be an amazing game-changing moment. It will cost a little bit of money because we need to fire up a gaming PC in the cloud for you to connect to be able to have that full immersive experience through your web browser. But once you can do that, the sky's the limit, and we're very excited about bringing in more creators and more explorers and more adventurers. We're going to have we're going to be announcing a lot of really exciting live events over the coming months, and also a lot of recurring shows. So yeah, it's an exciting time to get in, and I encourage anybody to join.
Wonderful. It sounds absolutely amazing. Ollie, thank you again so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. It was my pleasure. Cheers.